Hey, welcome. Welcome to it. It's the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update. I'm Jeremy. Thank you for joining me. And right at the top of the show, one of my favorite things, we got more Kiss drama. It's not really new drama, it's just reflection, pondering, pontificating on old Kiss drama. But I love Kiss. Ace Frehley, by the way, 10,000 volts drops on the 23rd. She hit me like 10,000 volts. It's a catchy tune. I like it. I'm looking forward to the album. What's the other one? Dancing on the Moon, Walking on the Moon, his second single. I kind of dig it too. Looking forward to it. That happens the 23rd. But Ace Frehley has once again slammed Paul Stanley for the comments the Kiss frontman made about the original Kiss guitars on the Howard Stern show. Now, there was a lot of drama around Kiss being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Don't get me started. It was ridiculous it took as long as it did for them to be nominated. But then at the actual induction, Ace and Peter didn't play. So the Kiss played with Tommy and Eric, the replacement Spaceman and Catman. Back in March of last year, Howard Stern asked Stanley why he and Gene Simmons didn't have Peter and Ace perform in the induction. Paul said, they were demanding, quite honestly, that we play with the two original guys, Peter and Ace. And at this point, that would be demeaning to the current Kiss band and also would give some people confusion. Because if you saw people on stage who looked like Kiss but sounded like that, maybe we should be called Piss. Whoa. So, as you can imagine, Ace not so happy with that, and so he finally responded to that in an interview with Rock of Nations with Dave Kinchin and Shane McErchin. That's a podcast. You can check it out. He said, quote, I don't know what caused or went through Paul's head when he made that statement. If me and Peter performed with him on stage, we'd sound like piss. But it really aggravated me, and I got really mad, and I went on the Eddie Trunk show and promised to come back in a month or 2 weeks and spill some dirt. And speaking to my attorney and my manager and my agent and my close confidants, they all said, why don't you take the high road? And I did. And I really didn't spill anything that most people didn't know already. But apparently, it sounds like Ace has some dirt that he could spill, but he took the high road and he didn't. But as for whether he thinks he will ever get a chance to play with Gene and Paul again, he said, I really don't think it's ever going to happen again. I think too much water has gone under the bridge, and I'm super busy with my new career just as Kiss ends up winding down their career, which makes no sense whatsoever. So it sounds like he thinks they should keep going. Guys, it ain't over yet, right? I would not be surprised if we see them come back. He continues, they must think it was some kind of master plan that as soon as they did their last show, I was going to, and it wasn't at all. There was no master plan. It's just that I was rushing to finish my new record, 10,000 volts, because it was 6 months behind. And finally, we just cut some corners. The album would have been a lot better if I had another month to do it, but I'm still very happy with the record. I don't think there's any filler. And there's a large variety of songs on the record. There's a ballad. I'm not sure how I feel about Ace singing a ballad. We'll see how that goes. There's an instrumental. There's a cover. So there you go. The 23rd, that will drop. Carl Palmer, famous drummer of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, also a member of Asia. He's releasing a 3 CD and 1 Blu-ray box set called Fanfare for the Common Man. That, of course, one of the big ELP classics. It hits the shelves April 5th. The new set features Palmer's time as 1/3 of the pioneering progressive rock group, but also stretches back to include his time in freak beat band The Craig, and features tracks from Palmer's time with Chris Farlow, Atomic Rooster, as well as post-ELP bands such as his own PM Asia 3 and working with Mike Oldfield. Of course, Mike Oldfield was the guy that played the theme of The Exorcist. What's it? Tubular Bells. I didn't know that. I didn't know Carl Palmer had, excuse me, had played with him. So, anyways, there's this big thing coming on, and there's other people playing. Let me see here. Oh, this is on the DVD. It also features a Blu-ray disc featuring The Rhythm of Life, an audio-visual documentary narrated by Palmer himself, with live and exclusive behind-the-scenes footage featuring ELP, Asia, Crazy World of Arthur Brown. I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire. Yeah, that's all I know about the Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Carl Palmer Band, ELP, Legacy, as well as featuring Frank Sinatra, Carmine Appice. Or is it Carmine Appice? Carmine App. Vinny is Vinny Appice, but I think Carmine is Carmine Appice. Even though they're brothers, they pronounce their last names different. Buddy Rich, Tony Iommi, Alice Cooper, and more. Lots of people on the Blu-ray portion. So if you're a fan of Carl Palmer or ELP, that sounds like it's pretty cool. April 5 is when it hits. From the "But hey, what about me" file. First of all, a little context here. I've had two different people say, Jeremy, you got to watch this thing on Netflix. There's this thing on Netflix called Greatest Night in Pop. It's a documentary about the recording and all the behind the scenes that happened with the recording of We Are the World, right? I mean, that had everyone on it. We Are the World was the American version of Band-Aid that did Feed the World. So my senior year in high school, Christmas 1984, they roll out this Band-Aid, Feed the World, Do They Know It's Christmas Right? And then the Americans followed suit a few months later and did We Are the World. All of it raising money for USA for Africa. Or not US, Aid for Africa. USA for Africa was We Are the World. Band-Aid was Bob Geldof's group. Anyways, I digress. This documentary is about the We Are the World recording and all that. Sheila E. says she felt used by the creative team behind the 1985 all-star charity single We Are the World. Who? All right, let's move on to my email. Okay, this is a great email, and I want your help with this. And you'll see why in a minute. But I would love for you to email me your thoughts that we could share with this gentleman sending the email. Let me read you the email and you'll see what or you can even chime in here with some recommendations. Hello, friend. I've been wanting to write to you for a long time, but you disappeared for a while. He's referring, of course, to the fact that I haven't had done a new podcast in like 2 months. I did disappear. And I somehow forgot about it. But today, I caught you on the air and decided to write you a letter. I hope the first letter reached you and you just didn't have the time to read it. I know this is the first one I've got, so I must not have gotten that. I'm a big rock fan. I like a lot of riffs and industrial most of all. After I started watching you, I added you to my playlist, Boston, Speedwagon, and Whitesnake. I have 2 questions for you. 1, help me and tell me what is similar to what I have listed. As a musician, suggest to me a band that I do not know about and that I might like based on the bands that I listen to. I like these bands: Rammstein. Is it Rammstein or Rammstein? Rammstein, Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, Guns N' Roses, Kiss. Then he says, I remember your dissatisfaction with the Avatars. Okay. Autograph, Twisted Sister, Rob Zombie, Iron Maiden, Marilyn Manson, Soundgarden, Anthrax, Motley Crue, Faith No More, Papa Roach, Pantera, Metallica, AC/DC, Nirvana. I remember you don't like grunge, and Linkin Park. And let me just say, I don't think I ever said I don't like grunge, but I'm not a big fan. There was some good grunge. I don't want to just flat out say I don't like grunge, but he's pretty spot on. Number two, you said you liked a couple of European bands, but you're mostly a fan of Made in the USA. But have you ever heard of Russian rock? And what can you say about it? Bands like, and they're in Cyrillic, they're in Russian letters, so I can't read these. Or about Gorky Park, specially created for America. Your listener, Mr. Kuza, from 6,000 miles away, Saratov, Russia. So cool. That's awesome. Mr. Kuza, thank you for sending an email from Russia. There are a few things to chime in on there. Here's where I want your help, guys. What other bands would you recommend? He listed the bands he likes. What other bands would you recommend? I have a few that I want to recommend. And let's answer the second question first. I am familiar with Gorky Park. Gorky Park came out in the late 80s. They were around and they were a Russian, late 80s, early 90s. They were a Russian hair metal band, and they were pretty good. Yeah, so I am familiar with them. The other bands you mentioned that are written in Russian characters, I'm not familiar with, but I'll definitely check some of those out. The bands I would recommend, and you mentioned a lot of the big ones. Obviously, I'd throw in Judas Priest if you've never listened to Judas Priest. Here's one that I always recommend when I can: Riot. Mr. Kuza, you would love Riot. Check out Riot, specifically the album Fire Down Under. If you can check that out, I think you'd really like that. Judas Priest, Riot. Who else would you recommend? I like some of the hair metal that you didn't mention. I like Rat, Dokken, right? A lot of that's you're probably already you didn't list them, but Scorpions. Scorpions are huge. And another point, you said that I like USA made. As I think about it, Mr. Kuza, actually, I think I'd probably cite more European bands as my favorite bands than American bands, even. So, like, you've heard me talk about UFO. UFO should be added to the list. UFO, I would highly recommend. And of course, the Michael Schenker Group. And they're European bands right there. Michael Schenker Group, UFO. You mentioned Iron Maiden. I threw in Judas Priest. I'm not, if I was to put on a scale, if I like more US bands or British bands or / European bands, I think there'd probably be more European bands. I mean, I love Journey. I love my American bands too. Journey, Van Halen, Riot is actually an American band that I mentioned. But that's an interesting thing. I'm going to have to start making a list now to see. But I think it's probably more European or British bands would be on the list than American bands. That's an interesting exercise. But hopefully that helps. There's a few suggestions. I really appreciate you sending the email, and I'm glad that you are listening. That is awesome. In fact, any of you can email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com, and I like to share those emails right here on the Daily Update. And just another little logistics thing that I want to share. I've been thinking about this. Should I do this? Should I not? And what I think I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start releasing updates as podcast episodes also. So you can hear the update here on X or Facebook or YouTube, wherever you watch the update. But then I think I'll make those into short little podcast episodes that will be available for folks that listen to just the podcast. And then I'll continue to do the long form podcast with JR. In fact, we're scheduled to record one tonight. So we'll get back on track. So you'll get the regular, the longer, 60-minute, 90-minute episodes with JR and I, but then we'll also have the daily updates. We'll get posted every day. So I think that'll reach more. The folks that listen to the podcast can at least hear the updates, because people don't all listen. I don't expect everyone to listen to me in every format, right? Most of the people that listen to the podcast probably just listen to the podcast. And there's probably folks that only listen to the update. So I think if I put the update on as a podcast also, that will give a chance to, and let's be honest, you want as many people to click on your stuff as possible. That's the path to world domination, right? So I think I'll just start Start doing that. Russ Hathaway. Russ is chiming in. Russ, thank you so much. What album released during your formative youth years that you only discovered much later? That is a great. You know what, Russ? That could be an entire episode. And I have a few thoughts here. It was kind of before here's a perfect example. A couple good ones. I never listened to, I was aware of it, but I never listened to Dio era Black Sabbath. Okay. So like when Heaven and Hell came out, and I was 12, 13 years old when that started. So that was definitely my formative years. I had listened to, my friend got Mob Rules, and I remember hearing Sign of the Southern Cross in like 1981 or whenever it came out. So I do remember hearing that. But for the most part, I was in the Aussie camp. I was listening to Blizzard and Diary, and I just kind of ignored. I lived in the boonies. I lived in Montana. There was no. I didn't have music magazines. So I assumed that the Dio era Sabbath was just not good. I mean, I didn't think anyone really liked it. I don't know why I thought that. It literally wasn't until, gosh, probably 2000 that I went back and bought Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. And I was like, holy cow, this stuff is excellent. Why wasn't I was listening to all the Ozzy stuff, ignoring the Dio Sabbath stuff. However, I was right on board with Dio, with Holy Diver and all that. But for whatever reason, I skipped the Dio Sabbath stuff, which was stupid. It wasn't until, 25 to 50, I don't know, however long, 15 years later, 20, however long that was, that I actually went back and listened to the Dio era Sabbath, which was stupid because that stuff is awesome. So I completely missed out on that. Another thing, I was a late comer to Pink Floyd. I was aware of Pink Floyd. I heard The Wall. I heard, what was played on the radio. I heard, but I've got to be honest, it's only been about the last 10 years that I've gone back and bought all the records, and I'm listening to them and starting to appreciate. They were just always so down, so depressing. I couldn't get into it. I always thought David Gilmour was an awesome player. The solo in Comfortably Numb. I always thought, I just could not get into Pink Floyd. But the last 10 years or so, I've gained an appreciation, and I like to listen to them now. And I listen to them quite a bit. Last night I listened last 2 nights in a row, I've listened to Animals all the way through, and I've grown to appreciate that album a lot more. So I was kind of late to the party on that. But the first thing I thought of with your question, Russ, was the Sabbath era Dio. But that's a great question, and I think that could be the topic of an episode. I love that. So Russ, thank you for chiming in. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Mr. Kuza, thank you for your email. You can all email me at classicguitarrock@mail.com. We'll do it all again tomorrow. You all have a great day. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.